Picture this. You're a wastelander, roaming the Capital Wasteland with hopes of finding a more permanent home. You're looking for a smaller settlement, hoping that would give you a better opportunity to contribute and help more than some of the larger settlements. So, where would be the best place to go? Let's talk about it. These are some of the best and worst small settlements in the Capital Wasteland. Andale. Found east of Tenpenny Tower is the small and unassuming town of Andale. Known as the greatest town in Virginia by its residents, Andale gives off the appearance of an idyllic small town, or at least as idyllic as the wasteland would allow. But would Andale make for a suitable home? While Andale doesn't have an elected leader or formal government, Jack Smith does act as a patriarch to the tight-knit extended family that lives there. His word may not be law, but he often speaks on behalf of the group and does his best to ensure their continued survival. As for the community, the town of Andale is definitely not what it seems at first. While the Smith and Wilson family present themselves as good Christians and loyal United States citizens, they hide a much darker secret. They chop people up and eat them. Evidence of such atrocities can be found in the town's garden shed and in the basement of Jack Smith's house. As such, the community of Andale is not entirely welcoming towards outsiders, rather only accepting those who also partake in the crime against humanity with them. This might pose a slight problem if you're not into that sort of lifestyle choice. As for supplies and resources, this might come as a surprise, but Andale seems pretty well off. I say this because the town has successfully survived for at least 4 generations, as Jack Smith mentions that he's lived in Andale his whole life, and his father before him, and his father, and his father's father. So quite a few Smith dads have been born and raised in this little post-apocalyptic town. While caravaneers and wastelanders have been warned to give Andale a wide berth when traveling, it would seem that word of mouth has not spread far enough, as residents of Andale would seem to have a steady stream of human corpses to chow down on. So their supplies and resources are surprisingly in a stable spot. But where they succeed in supplies, they lose out in safety. I'm going to sound real blunt here, but Andale might be the worst defended town in the entire wasteland. They have no exterior defenses. No walls, turrets, guard posts, nothing. Worse yet, their residents aren't armed too well either. The biggest piece of firepower that they have is a sawed-off shotgun carried by Jack Smith. So it wouldn't be all too difficult for the town to be sieged and potentially overrun. They would really have to rely on their pleasant nature and rumors to either passively disarm would-be threats or avoid them entirely. It's not a very safe settlement. And lastly, what is the chance that a nondescript wastelander would be welcome and given opportunity to integrate into the settlement? Honestly, I just don't think it would be possible for someone to easily join up with Andale. 1, as mentioned, it would require you to also be a cannibal, but 2, and something that might be a bigger problem, is that you'll always be ostracized. Andale is home to a very close family, and I mean like Sweet Home Alabama type close. You will always be known as an outsider to them. Unlike the rest of the residents, you're not blood related. I think that sort of ostracization could lead to tension. And besides, if their food situation ever does run low, guess who's going to be next on the chopping block? Probably you. And so if I had to rate how good of a place Andale would be to settle in, I'd give Andale 2 bloodied rippers out of 10. Not a great score. Moving on. Arefu. Sitting atop a crumbling overpass northwest of Vault 106 is Arefu. It's a small and isolated settlement that clings to survival in the wasteland. It is a handful of scrap metal homes teetering dangerously close to the edge of collapse, both figurative and literally. I mean, surely that overpass can't stand forever. It's already decaying in some parts. But despite its precarious position, Arefu endures. But would it make for a good place to call home? Like Andale, Arefu doesn't have a formal government, but what it does have is a king. Evan King to be exact. Acting as the town's self-appointed protector, King keeps a watchful eye on the settlement's handful of residents, ensuring everyone is well taken care of, and more importantly, alive. Though it seems he has struggled in that department as of late. By the time the lone wanderer gets to Arefu, they discover that the settlement has been under attack by a group known as the Family. The Family is a group of reclusive, vampire-like wastelanders who have preyed on Arefu. The town's population, once claiming to be home to 30 people, has taken a significant nosedive down to 4 by the start of Fallout 3. With the help of the Lone Wanderer, a peace deal can be brokered between Arefu and the Family, trading protection for packs of blood. It's a weird arrangement, sure, especially considering the damage that the Family has done. But anything is better than getting murdered in your sleep, I suppose. So how does Arefu fare in terms of supplies? Well, surprisingly, they don't seem to be doing too bad for themselves. As mentioned, they are able to scrounge up enough blood packs to keep their end of the agreement with the Family. They also do have a small plot of farmland at the bottom of the overpass. That is where they kept the Brahmin before the Family killed them. And they are a frequent stop for many wandering merchants, with the Caravaneers setting up shop at the bottom of the overpass. And besides, for a population of 4, they don't need a whole lot in the way of supplies for themselves. So all in all, they're in a fine spot when it comes to resources and supplies. As for safety, as long as the agreement between Arefu and the Family holds up, I don't see how Arefu isn't one of the safest small settlements in the entire wasteland. The Family keeps the town protected. There's only one main entrance to the town, using the overpass. So while Arefu might not have any crazy firepower like automated turrets or sentry towers, they can focus their firepower down the only way up. So outside of any heavy artillery or siege tactics, I think Arefu is relatively safe from threat. Of course, if someone really wanted to wipe Arefu off the face of the earth, I'm sure they could. It's not an impenetrable fortress, but it is well defended in my opinion. And then there's the question of whether or not a nondescript wastelander could actually settle there. And I think it would be quite easy to actually. Despite the rude welcoming from Evan King, the town isn't openly hostile to outsiders, and they have a small population, so the extra manpower surely would be welcome. Final verdict, I'd give Arefu 8 blood packs out of 10. A house was recently vacated, it seems quite safe, and you likely won't be killed as long as you don't mind donating a little blood. Moving on. Canterbury Commons. Located on the eastern edge of the Capital Wasteland is one of the more well-known small settlements, Canterbury Commons. It has traders that pass through frequently and a handful of permanent residents. But is it a decent enough place to call home? Again, like many small settlements in the Capital Wasteland, Canterbury Commons lacks a formal government, but it is not without leadership. Uncle Ernest Rowe founded Canterbury Commons in 2258 and has acted as its mayor and leader ever since. Rowe oversees the settlement's day-to-day operations and works to keep trade routes running smoothly. He's not exactly a powerhouse of authority, but he's a reasonable man who tries his best to keep things organized. If you're looking for a place where one guy doesn't have absolute control over everything, Canterbury's leadership is about as fair as it gets in the wasteland. In terms of community, Canterbury is a little strange. It's a trade hub, so it sees a lot of foot traffic from merchants and travelers, but the actual population is surprisingly small. The real problem, though, is that the town is caught in the middle of a bizarre superhero rivalry. On one side, you've got the Mechanist, a guy in metal armor who commands an army of jury-rigged robots. On the other is the Ant-Agonizer, a self-proclaimed supervillain who somehow controls giant mutated ants. Their ongoing feud has turned Canterbury Commons into a battleground, and while the townspeople mostly try to ignore it, the occasional robot rampage or ant attack doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Now, let's talk about supplies. This is where Canterbury actually shines. As a trade hub, it has a steady access to food, weapons, medical supplies, and all the other essentials for surviving the wasteland. It's one of the only places where you can reliably buy and sell goods without getting shot at first. It may not be paradise, but you won't be starving anytime soon here, as long as you have the caps. Security, on the other hand, is a mixed bag. There aren't any real defenses, no walls, turrets, guards, just the usual militia. The superhero problem is an obvious issue, but beyond that, Canterbury isn't really prepared for a full-scale attack. If a raider gang or a pack of supermutants decide to roll through, it probably wouldn't take much to destroy the town. So would a nondescript wastelander be welcome in Canterbury Commons? Actually, yeah. Canterbury doesn't have much in the way of exclusivity. If you're willing to work, trade, or just keep your head down, nobody's going to question where you came from. It's a settlement built on commerce, and if you've got the caps to spend and invest, you'll likely be welcomed with open arms. Final rating: Canterbury Commons gets 7 superhero catchphrases out of 10. It's got trade and supplies, but it's also one bad superhero fight away from complete destruction. If you don't mind the occasional ant-attack or robot rampage, it's one of the better options out there. Moving on. Republic of Dave. Tucked away in the northeast corner of the Capital Wasteland, past Old Oni and its Deathclaw-infested ruins, is the Republic of Dave. Unlike most settlements, Dave doesn't just consider his little patch of land a town. No, it's an independent nation. And like any good nation, it has a leader, a visionary if you will, a true statesman. And that man is of course, Dave. But would the Republic of Dave make a suitable home for a wandering wastelander looking to settle down? Well, let's find out. Starting with leadership. This one's real simple. Dave runs the show. Officially, the Republic of Dave is a democracy, but in reality, it's more of a dictatorship with extra steps. Every so often, these citizens hold an election, but Dave is always the one real candidate. If anyone else dares to run, Dave simply rigs the results or declares the election invalid. It's his republic, and it's going to stay that way. Now, to be fair, Dave isn't the worst leader in the wasteland, sure. While he does rule with an iron fist, he keeps the place relatively safe and provides food and shelter for his people. But make no mistake, this is a one-man show, and you will never have a say in how things are run. Community-wise, the Republic of Dave is more of a family compound than a proper settlement. Everyone who lives here is directly related to Dave in some way. He has 2 wives with 6 kids among them. Outsiders are often turned away unless they make an offering to Dave or acknowledge and respect his rule and nation. Those who stay beyond their welcome are given 24 hours to leave, lest they be executed. It's a tight community, with little tolerance for those outside of it. Now let's talk supplies. The Republic of Dave is shockingly well stocked for such a tiny settlement. They've got crops and livestock, which is more than you can say for a lot of places in the wasteland. The community might be small, but they don't appear to be struggling to survive. Security is another mixed bag. To be fair, I suppose there aren't many secure places in the wasteland. The Republic is surrounded by a small fence reinforced with some scrap metal. This seems to be enough to keep out the average wastelander, but probably wouldn't do much against big packs of raiders or super mutants. That said, it's in a remote location, which helps keep trouble away. Dave himself carries a unique hunting rifle, and there are a few other weapons floating around. But if an actual attack happened, the Republic probably wouldn't last long. And finally, can a nondescript wastelander join up and make a life here? Technically, yeah, but practically, probably not. If you're not part of Dave's extended family, you'll always be an outsider. You can live here if you swear your fealty to Dave and he allows it, but you'll never have any real say in how things are run, and you'll always be at risk of getting kicked out if Dave ever changes his mind. It'll always be a place where you exist, but not where you belong. My final rating, the Republic of Dave gets 4 election interferences out of 10. It's got food and relative safety, but the whole one-man nation thing is a bit hard to ignore. If you're willing to live under Dave's rule and don't mind being part of his weird little dictatorship, you could do worse. But unless you're looking to boost his voter turnout, you might want to keep moving. Speaking of which, moving on. Big Town. Head north of Vault 101 and you'll eventually stumble upon Big Town. If the name sounds grand, don't get your hopes up. This place isn't that big and it hardly qualifies as a town. It's more like a hamlet. But could a wandering wastelander make a home here? Let's find out. First up, leadership, or rather, the lack of it. Big Town doesn't have a mayor or a sheriff or anything really. It's just a handful of former Little Lamplight kids who got kicked out once they hit 16, trying to make it on their own. Nobody's really in charge, which means there's no structure, no law, and no one to keep things in order. I suppose Red, their resident physician, could qualify as a leader, but just because she is the most responsible of the bunch. Still, despite this, the folks of Big Town make it work. As for the community, well, it's tough. The folks of Big Town are all quite friendly and chummy with one another, having grown up together. But they do remain on edge. The people here live in constant fear. They're either paranoid, traumatized, or both. And for good reason. Slavers and super mutants attack constantly. If they're not getting kidnapped, they're preparing for the next inevitable attack. By the start of Fallout 3, it's not really a settlement anymore. Rather, it's a waiting room for death. The matter of supplies is an odd one. The residents don't seem to worry much about their day-to-day survival needs. This makes me believe that they're fairly well off just from trading and scavenging. I suppose the surprising part about the kidnappings is that their security is not the worst I've seen. They have reinforced walls, a moat with a rope bridge being the only entrance, and always have a guard in combat armor stationed at the entrance. It's not the worst secured settlement in the wasteland. However, of course, these deterrents don't seem to help all too much, as they still find themselves on the receiving end of mutant and slaver raids. And that brings us to how welcome you would be. Can a nondescript wastelander join up and make a life here? I think the answer is yes. While the people of Big Town are a bit on edge when they meet the lone wanderer, once you help the town out a bit, they open up more, seeming to make friends with the player character. And with the town's lack of true leadership and capable defenses, you could find ample opportunity to turn Big Town into a successful settlement. Final rating, Big Town gets 7 kidnapped residents out of 10. While things are a bit in the dumps by the start of Fallout 3, there is a ton of potential for Big Town. I really think that with some proper defenses and maybe a bit of outside trade with Megaton, Big Town could become true to its name. It could become a big town. And those are what I believe to be some of the best and worst small settlements in Fallout 3 to call home. Of the 5 towns we went over today, Arefu is the best, with some solid defenses, and Andale is the worst, as you'll likely be eaten before long. I don't know, Jack Smith is just too suspicious of a name to trust. But that's all from me today, folks. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe. Want to see me rate more settlements? Let me know. Join the Discord. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.
Oh, look at this. The spy has returned to gather intelligence. You'll get nothing from me, spy.